Okay, so today we're going to be working on the nose, and I like to approach noses in two different ways. I suppose it depends on how I'm feeling at the time. So I either go from light to dark, building up, including the nostrils, and then suddenly really darken the nostrils at the end, or I map the dark parts in so it's easier to see and then kind of work around it. So it really does depend on the kind of detail that we've got within the nose. And I think for today, I'm going to do a little bit of both. I'm not going to go completely through one whole technique. I'm going to do a little bit of both because I think that would just be easier to follow. Fingers crossed. So what I'm going to do is look at the top of the nose, and I can see most of that is quite a cool colour. So I'm going to go in with a cold grey too, and I want to add a base layer of this cool colour to the top. I'm going to add it to all of the areas that I can see. So it's a relatively light colour, but it also has enough pigment in it that you can kind of work out where it's going, because sometimes if we put the cold grey one in, for example, which I'm going to do a little bit more over this side, sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to see, although this is showing up not too badly. I'm going to add this all to the left hand side of the nostril because that's pretty light, and if I put a light colour down, I know that I can then use the slice tool if needed. And I think I'm going to keep the ivory to hand as well and put a little bit of that down onto the edge there. So what I've done is I've put the fur all the way up to the edge of the nostril. I'm going to put the cream on this side. Although you're not going to be able to see it very well, I want to be able to use the slice tool. So although this is pretty dark, if I put this light colour down first, then I know that I can scrape to that. And I'm going to use a combo of the ivory because there's a bit of warmth there, and the cold grey one. It doesn't really matter too much at this stage as long as you're using lovely light colours. I'm going to go all the way along the nostril at the bottom. Generally there's a light part under the nostril hole that reflects the light, and it's usually pretty white, so we either want to leave that free, or I mean this left hand side is pretty light, so I don't want to put too much detail in there, but you can't go too far wrong with the cold grey. And the cold grey one, adding a little bit more of the ivory just so that I've got a good few layers down for the slice. And blending as well. You're aiming to get rid of the graininess a little bit because we don't want it to be grainy. And I mean, the texture's there, which is good. We want a little bit of texture in the nose, but we don't want it to be, we want control of that. We don't want it to be grainy, have a uniformed grainy pattern over the whole of the nose. We want to be able to control. I'm going to put the pencils to the side so that I can write down which ones I'm using. And I think what I'm going to do now is, which I don't normally do, is I'm going to map in the nostrils because I think we're going to lose them otherwise. I'm going to map in the darkest parts now that I can see so I can work out where I'm going. That lovely teardrop shape of the nostril on that side, on the right hand side. And how does that curve round? It's a little bit flatter than I've done it there, so just adjusting and then coming up to the edge, and then it goes up straight, and then it kind of goes at a little bit of an angle there. So I'm going to fill that in. Just want to make it a little bit more teardrop shaped. Actually, I think the line comes more like this. So again, all adjusting as you go. And then we're going to come down with that teardrop there. So it's a bit of a thicker line there. I'm just sketching in as I'm going. Like I said, it doesn't really matter too much at these early stages, but once I like the shape, then I can go in and add the darkness. Using a really light hand, small circles. I'm not really going in too hard because I might need to adjust it. You never know. So the nostrils need to be lined up with the eyes. Make sure you do that. The second one's obviously really important. Otherwise it will look quite strange. And now this nostril's got so many different tucks and folds in it that it's not a straightforward teardrop shape like the other one is. So I'm just going to map in the lines that I can see, and then I'm going to follow underneath further down from the nostril to where I come into the next darkest part, which is quite far down. And then this part above is quite light, and I'm going to put that in. And then there's a real light part there, so I'm going to map that in, and then it comes round into a bit of darkness, and then it's very dark here. So that's why it's important to use a light hand, because you just want to adjust it. And just looking at the nostrils, they look a little bit off. And I think that's because we've got this light part here. So don't jump in and change it too quickly if you think, well, that's actually the wrong angle, because as long as the top of the nostrils are okay, so as long as the top of the nostrils are kind of lined up with the eyes, which this isn't, it just needs to come up a little bit. And I think that's because there's an awful lot of darkness at the top. So I need to map that in as well. That kind of adds, I'm using little scribbly lines because there's quite a lot of texture. And then just coming down a little bit with that. How's that looking? That's looking much better. So using the top of the nostrils as a bit of a guide as to where the dark part is, using scribbly lines, again mapping everything in. And then it comes across the nose here. We've always got this center line, so we can map that in. We don't have to do it too dark. And then I just want to make sure that I'm getting the darks in the right place. So how's that looking? Much better. Then, like with every nostril, there's a lighter part underneath. I'm going to bring that edge around there, darken up that bit there. Come down with the shape of that dark part. Add in the lighter part. It's not very light, but it's lighter than usually the line and the darker part around the bottom of the nostril. That kind of blends into the fur here. And then there's another line there, so just mapping that in. Mapping in the shape. And that part there, that's dark. I think we're starting to get the overall look of the nose now. So I can start to just add a little bit more deep darkness here, because I kind of know I'm in the right place. That's why it's important not to go too heavy-handed in at the beginning. Darkening up here, darkening up there, and then coming around with that shape in there. And then this nostril, we need to add these little lines, the darkness. And actually this dark sepia is a really good colour to add. So we're going to use little circles, and then little circles that come down here, because we do want a little bit of texture. We don't want it to be too smooth. So I'm following the shape of the nostril as it comes down here. There's always a lot of darkness around the outer edge. So I'm just going to go over it a few more times. Same this side. Scribbly lines. This actually looks like a hair that comes across, but I'm going to leave that out. You can do that obviously with your drawings. You can keep as much detail in or leave it out if you don't want to put it in. I'm going to darken the edge so that starts to make sense. and darken the top. There's some little lines, little scribbly lines that comes across to there. And then a little line there. And then coming up this side, just adding this darkness in, coming up into the top, and how that starts to merge into the top of the nose. And I think what we're going to do now is start with some bluey colours, some cold colours. We're going to build up through the cold greys, going in with the cold grey 3, because we do want to add a little bit more. So you can see there's quite a lovely shine at the top of the nose that doesn't have much texture. So what I tend to do with most of my work is find the next easy step, because I think it's quite easy to get overwhelmed and then you want to put it down, you don't want to carry on, you don't really know where to go from there. So the next easy step is just to go into this area that has no real texture. It's just a lovely cold grey colour. It goes all the way up to the top. And then it kind of comes down here. So adding a few layers of that, small circles. And then adding a little bit to this shine as well. I want to come down across here just a tad, adding a few bits of that colour in there. And then I'm going to work up to the cold grey 5. Because we've got the lighter colours down, we should be able to scrape through and create a little bit of texture with the slice tool, but I'm just going to add small circles on the nose here and over here, because obviously a dog's nose does have these interesting little circles going on. I want to leave a gap there because it's quite light, and then I want to start to bring the darker colours of the cold grey into this section. So building it up slowly, small circles, little scribbly lines. Coming down into this kind of nostril. It's a little bit more warm there, but it comes across as at a slant. Adding a little bit of to the top of that shine. Adding a little bit here. So it's a lovely dark colour. It's quite a defined line this side next to that shine. I'll get that in. And then it comes all the way over here. Little scribbly lines. Coming down a little bit in the middle. Still creating little texture, little scribbly lines. Okay, I'm starting to map in the top now. Now we're going to go in with some warm greys, warm grey 5. I'm going to start to build up the colours in here. So quite dark, but still using a light hand. coming up here. I'm not going to go in with the black until the very end. There's a line that comes up there, attaches to the side of that. All of this area is pretty dark. So using the scribbly circles again. Coming into this side as well. Darkening up. Coming down here to where the fur kind of meets the nose, so it doesn't look like it's completely stuck on. And coming up this side. So now we've mapped in the darker parts. You can see as we're starting to add the midtones, the black or the dark areas, the darkest areas, usually the line down the middle and the nostrils, they start to fade away. So you feel like you're going really dark to begin with, but actually you're not. You can go an awful lot darker. So this is why it's important to build up from light to dark, nice and slowly. But what I have done before, like I said, I used two techniques. Sometimes you lose, if you work from light to dark and don't map in the darkest parts, you can kind of lose where you are. And that has happened a few times. Like I said, it depends on the nose that you're working on, whether it's straightforward. Sometimes they really are, or whether there's a little bit more going on, like this one. There's different colours. Its head's on a slant, so that does make a difference. So building up through the darks, leaving that lower bit a little bit lighter. And working up through the greys into this bottom section. Same this side. Just adding some little details into that nostril. Adding some details above, like I said, going up into there. Coming around here. There's a light part, which is still pretty dark. So this is when we're going to have to start building things up and possibly adding a little bit more detail into the nostril area and into the darker areas, just so that it still shows, it still looks like you've mapped it in, because you can see how easy it starts to disappear. Really start to build up. And I come down by that line, down by that bottom bit. A lot of this is just going to be black, so I can gradually build that up. That bottom section up towards the nostril is really dark. This bottom section is really dark. And some lovely lines that go up. Still using a light hand because we don't know how many layers we need to get in. This top section is actually really quite dark. Still using circles, so the ends are kind of blurry. Circles here. Okay, so now we've started to build up through the darker colours. it's almost time to darken up the nostril again. So there are some quite prominent lines that I just want to make sure that I don't forget. And that part there. Tidying up some of the edges. Going in at the bottom. Small circles still. And then just thinking about this nostril, that comes down a little bit lower. And then there's this kind of triangle of dark, not really dark. And then it blends up into this part here. Curving around. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit more of the cold greys now. I'm starting to build this up. I want a sharp pencil. So building up here. Coming down a little bit into this. A little bit here. Coming up here. Adding some depth up here. Making sure that's as dark as it needs to be. Tidying up that line again. There's a line coming across the middle. There's a curve that goes up here. Darkening up this midline. And I'm going to actually add a little bit of blue. Sky blue is always quite a good colour. It's just quite a soft blue. I'm going to add it all the way over this right hand side. It also ties it in nicely to the rest of the dog with the fur because we put quite a lot of blue in here. I'm going to add some blue into this part. And I'm going to add some blue down here. So you can see it's starting to build up now, it's starting to get there. I'm going to put blue all over this really dark part. Warm grey 6 again. Just start to add a little bit up here, a little bit of a break in it. So I'm going to add these lines in that I can see, so a little bit of detail. If you see some detail and you don't want to forget about it, then it's a good idea to just put it in. This part here, coming down. And that kind of merges into the rest of the bottom part. I think what we need to do now is add the darkest parts in, and we're going to have to go in with black. There's no other colour. But I think we might add in a little bit of the indigo, dark indigo. The dark indigo, just so that we've got some lovely rich colours. So I've sharpened the dark indigo, thinking about where the real rich dark parts are. So I'm going to add it to the side of the nostril here. Just going in with a light hand. I'm going to add it into the middle of the nostril. It kind of comes up a little bit. And comes down a little bit. It's not over the whole thing. And then this line is pretty dark. Very, very blue at the moment, but don't worry, we are going to add lots of black over the top, the middle section, big circles. There's a curve there that's really dark, and then that kind of comes down into that midline, and then the whole of the bottom. Same this side. That curve. Coming up here. Definitely this nostril. And then that curve going up there. And then this whole section on the right hand side, that's pretty dark. And then underneath this part here as well. Okay, so I'm going to go in with the black now, over the top of those areas. That black line, that area next to it. There's a curved bit in there that's really dark. So I'm just starting to look a little bit more closely at these areas to see actually how dark they are and whether they're all over dark or whether there's lighter parts within, which there usually is. So just adding a little bit of darkness here, making sure that it's not just a straight line or a bulged line. There's actually little knobbly bits, little darker bits within. Coming up here, to get to the edge there, adding it into these lines. There's a line there. Darkening up the nostril. Coming around here. Coming up here as well, just adding to this bit. We could probably go in with the dark sepia, but I'm just using a light hand. There's some little lines in. There's actually a line that goes, it's quite curved around there. So it's following the shape of the nostril, but it's not quite as dark as the nostril. Breaking up these lines a little bit. I'm going to go in with the dark sepia and start to just add in the kind of the dark parts, but they're not as black as they are. So adding the little circles here, curving it around a little bit, coming up to a point, darkening up this edge, adding some depth in there, darkening up this part as well, and this side. There's quite a lot of warmth going on this side, and this is just disappearing into the fur then. Scribbly lines, little circles. Darken up this bit, but not as dark as above. Darkening this bit below. And on this side as well, bits that stick out. darker part there, just adding to the side of the nose. We want to darken up a little bit of this, so a few little lines, so it's not all as white as I've got it, and going with a dark grey, which is lovely bluey grey here. I'm going to add this in here as well. Just making sure it's as dark as it needs to be. That curve at the top there, letting it disappear into the fur. Blending in this part. Definitely darkening that bit. A little curve there. Little bits at the top. I want this to kind of be attached and then there to be a gap in the middle. Another good way of making the gap bigger, good way of getting a kind of a broken up shine is the kneadable eraser, and just dabbing that in the area that you want it. So you put the pencil down and then you kind of lift it back up again, but it doesn't lift all of it up, it lifts a little bit up, and then you end up with this lovely muted, soft shine. Okay, so we still need to work on darkening up the bottom. I'm going to go in with a different black, polychromos, or you can just start to build up through the different blacks, because you'll find that, or the different blues, you'll find that they will lay down nicely on top of each other. So we need to still darken this up some more, making sure it's as dark as it needs to be, especially this bottom section. The shape of it coming up here. This section here, this section here. How it attaches to the top of that nostril, and then some broken up parts there, coming around to that top part, but broken up, little scribbly lines. Darkening up the nostril. So you can use the luminance as well. The luminance is a little bit more matte than the Pablos, so just getting the shape right. Needs to be really dark because it needs to look like a hole. It's going into the dog's nose. It's not just a shadow. It's really dark in there. Usually the edges need to be really dark as well. Darkening up this part. So now we've got all the lovely details in, we're just glazing over and darkening where it all needs to be a little bit darker. Coming into that part, that edge line, which is always really dark, just darkening that. And then the inside of the nostril, the darkest part. This left-hand side. Shape up there. Coming across there. making that area a little bit smaller. How that curves around. And then now we've got those dark parts in, we know that we need to go in a little bit darker up here. I'm going to add a bit of a darker blue, Inden Throne blue. And then I'm going to add it to this bar right across the nose, leaving the section in the middle light, adding some interesting lines. Go across there. There's always dark within the light, don't forget that. Coming across with this part, making sure that this is nice and dark. And then it kind of comes down into a line. And then that kind of triangle shape. A few little lines. There's some the other side as well. I'm going to soften it with the cold grey one. Especially this side, that kind of needs to be more of a mid-tone. That section there and that section there are the lightest. Just softening the pencil strokes, blending it in a little bit. This side needs to be darker, that's still too light, so I'm going to go in with my trusted dark sepia and just glaze over that. So it doesn't get rid of it, it doesn't take away the lightness, but it just tones it back a little bit because it's just too light compared to the rest. It doesn't balance it out. But until you've got the other parts in that are darker, it's hard to tell how dark to go. Line as well, just toning that down a little bit. Still need to go darker here. The Inden Throne still. So a few layers. Making sure that you do a little bit in the lighter part as well. A few lines. And then we're going to go in with the cold grey 6 and add grey to the blue. Little lines, little scribbly lines. So kind of toning down the blue, little circles. And then that white section is going to appear brighter. If you want to make things darker, just going over a few times in that area. And we want to pull together this side. So the cold grey 3. It's not as dark as it's not as light as the other side. Just softening the pencil strokes. Adding a little bit of grey in at the bottom, little scribbly lines. Definitely darker here, still cold grey 6. Comes up a little bit. This panel that goes across. I'm going to go in a little bit with the slice tool. especially on this section. So we just want to add some interesting textures. Because we've put those lighter colours in, we can scratch back to basically light or white. Tiny little dots. There's some areas of texture in there. There's definitely some texture going on down here. Scraping away into there. Little lines here. Texture into this part. Just break it up a little bit. Breaking this section up. So this is why the slice tool is so helpful. All of these marks are difficult to do on their own with pencil. If you can add these little marks in with the Tombow, it just with the slice, it just makes it a little bit easier. Just want to scrape away the edge a little bit there, just to break it up. Not too much. Adding a few interesting lines. And then we still really need to darken this part here. We've used the slice, so you end up getting a little bit more texture in. I'm going to darken it up a little bit more compared to the top. Coming around here. And then use the slice again. That top part there, that direct line. Slice again. Just to break it up a tad. And then these lines in here, just adding those in. Little dots. Little scribbles. Lighter parts. And down there. And then we can add, if you lick your watercolour pencils, we can add a little bit of lightness with the white. Can add little specks of white in with the white as well. Just little dots, which works really nicely. So just looking at some finishing touches, but I think the main thing that we need to do is so I'm just making that a little bit smaller, just a tad, because it's a little bit too big. So I'm just looking over the whole thing again, darkening up this a little bit with the dark sepia, adding a few little lines in. Same this side, this just needs to be a little bit darker. coming up into a little bit of a point so that that nostril almost disappears. You don't really know how dark it is in there. It all ends up blending into each other. And coming up here as well. So darkening this little bit. I just want to use my kneadable just to break up the edge a little bit of the pencil I've just put in. Just making it into a point and then softening the edge a little bit. That's better. And down this side. So it lifts up a little bit, but it doesn't lift up everything that you've just done, which we certainly wouldn't want to happen. I'm going to add a little bit more cold grey to this side, just to pull all of that in. Go over the top with that. A little bit on the edge as well, just to soften that part. I'm going to soften this part. Add a little bit here. Just creating a bit of a curve. And then with the dark sepia, just want to darken that top part there, just so it doesn't stand out as much. And then I think what we need to do is, I'm just going to put a little line in. I think you could keep tinkering forever. We need to finish this side of the muzzle because that's looking strange. It needs to be more like that. And then once we've got that dark area in, I'll always come back to the nose and have another go and just see if anything needs darkening. But we're kind of 80 to 90% there. I actually look back over the nose and I don't really feel like I need to add anything else. So I think I'm going to leave it there. I'm just going to zoom out and show you the whole thing as it stands. So yeah, I feel okay about that. Just looking to see if there's any slight, that needs to come up a little bit. Little bit of darkness there, a little bit here, tiny little amounts. It's like not a little bit of darkness there, just a touch on the side, a little bit here. I think you could keep tinkering forever, but I think yeah, I'm pleased with that. I think it looks okay. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you got some helpful tips on how to create your own realistic dog's nose. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything else that you need help with, that you struggle with, or any of the parts along the nose that you found a little bit difficult and would like some kind of extra tips on. I'd be more than happy to answer your questions and to really trying to help you move forward. I've always found noses quite difficult myself, so I'm feeling like every one I do, there's a little bit of a breakthrough. If you did like this video, then please don't forget to like and subscribe and to share this video with your friends, and don't forget that bell icon so that you're notified of future videos. And I really look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.